Welcome to the Deep Dive. So you flagged Alan Watts' The Way of Zen. You wanted to get a better handle on it.
Right.
So that's what we're doing. This is basically our attempt to distill the core of Zen, at least as Watts lays it out for you.
Yeah, our goal isn't just to summarize. We want to really dig into those key insights, the ideas that, kind of shift your perspective.
Makes Zen make sense.
Exactly. We'll look at the history, the background, and then get into the principles, the practice.
Makes sense. And Watts structures it nicely, right? Part one is history, background,
Mm-hmm.
and part two is the principles and practice. So we'll cover both.
We will.
Let's maybe start where Watts suggests the link between Zen and Taoism,
Hmm.
because that seems foundational, especially for Zen in China.
It really is. You can't understand Zen's development in China without seeing how deeply it interacted with Taoism. I mean, Zen is Buddhist, fundamentally.
Right.
But when Buddhism arrived in China, Taoism was already, well, a part of the philosophical landscape. It wasn't ignored, it was absorbed, integrated, a real cultural dialogue.
Okay, so Taoism was kind of in the air. What were some of its core ideas that really clicked with or maybe shaped what became Zen?
Well, a big one is Wu Wei. It often gets translated as non-action.
Non-action. Sounds passive.
Yeah, but that's a bit misleading. It's less about literally doing nothing and more about effortless action. Acting in harmony with the natural flow of things, the Tao.
Okay.
Lao Tzu, the sort of legendary founder, he said the Tao operates by not making, by not doing, yet achieves everything.
That's one of those paradoxes, isn't it? Not doing, but getting it all done.
Yeah.
How does that actually work?
Well, think about Chuang Tzu's examples, like a master craftsman, maybe a butcher or a carpenter, who's so skilled their movements are just fluid, instinctive.
Like they're not thinking about every single cut.
Exactly. They're not forcing it. They're just in sync with the material, with the moment. That's
Yeah.
Wu Wei. It's that spontaneity that comes from deep practice, from letting go of the constant mental chatter, the morning after effect Watts mentions.
So it's accessing a different kind of knowing, not just the logical, analytical part of the brain.
Precisely. Taoism really emphasizes that some things just can't be fully grasped by, putting them in neat little boxes or defining them with words. The Tao itself is famously beyond description.
Right.
Watts talks about the limits of linear thinking, our habit of breaking everything down. Both Taoism and later Zen really point towards a more holistic, intuitive understanding.
Like trying to understand music by just analyzing the notes individually. You miss the melody.
That's a great analogy, yeah. It values the direct experience over just the explanation.
And wasn't Taoism also a bit critical of, like, social conventions and rules?
Oh, absolutely. You had Confucianism, which was very focused on social order, rituals, propriety.
Hmm.
Taoism pushed back against that. It saw too much artificiality, too much rigid convention as getting in the way of living naturally, authentically. It valued the genuine over the contrived.
Like getting back to basics, philosophically.
Yeah, kind of. And when you live in line with the Tao, this natural quality emerges. They call it Tei. It's often translated as virtue or power.
Virtue.
But again, not in a preachy, moralistic way. It's more like inherent power, natural charisma, the kind of effortless effectiveness you see when something is perfectly aligned with its nature.
Okay, so we have this Taoist backdrop. Naturalness, spontaneity, Wu Wei, this wisdom beyond words. Then Buddhism arrives, specifically Mahayana Buddhism.
Yeah.
How does that start to interact?
Right. Mahayana Buddhism is the stream that really flows into China and mixes with these Taoist ideas. And Mahayana itself had some key features.
Like what?
Well, compared to earlier forms, it offered a path to enlightenment that felt more maybe accessible, especially for lay people, not just monks. And it emphasized the bodhisattva ideal.
A bodhisattva.
Yes, someone who achieves enlightenment but chooses to delay their final liberation to help all other beings reach enlightenment too. This idea of universal compassion really resonated in China.
And what core Buddhist concepts took root and then maybe transformed a bit in this new environment?
A huge one is the Buddha's own enlightenment experience, Bodhi. The crucial part is that it wasn't about mastering texts or complex rituals. It was a direct, immediate, wordless realization of reality.
Ah, so that emphasis on direct experience.
Exactly. It echoes that Taoist sense that ultimate truth is beyond words. This becomes absolutely central to Zen, the idea of direct pointing.
Okay. And the basic Buddhist framework, the Four Noble Truths, did they play a role?
Absolutely. They form the foundation. The truth of suffering, or dukkha, that life inherently involves dissatisfaction.
Right.
Then the origin of suffering, which is clinging, craving, attachment, trishna. Then the possibility of suffering ceasing nirvana. And finally, the path to that cessation, the Eightfold Path.
The diagnosis and the cure, basically.
Pretty much. Zen takes this framework, but often approaches it less through detailed doctrinal study and more through, again, that direct experiential path.
Got it. And then there's no self, anatma. That
Yeah.
one always bends my brain a little.
Huh. Yeah, it's a big one. It directly challenges our usual assumption of having a fixed, permanent me inside. Buddhism, and Zen follows this, suggests that what we call the self is more like a process, a collection of constantly changing physical and mental events, thoughts, feelings, sensations.
Like a river. Always changing, but we still call it the same river.
That's a classic analogy, yeah. There's no unchanging soul or entity at the core. It's ownerless phenomena rising and passing. The perception of a solid, separate self is seen as an illusion, Maya.
And this illusion fuels the clinging and craving that cause suffering.
That's the idea. We grasp onto this illusory self, its desires, its fears, and that creates friction, dissatisfaction.
Okay, and karma fits in here too.
Right. Karma isn't fate or cosmic punishment. It's more like the law of cause and effect applied to intentional actions. Our motivations and actions create ripples, shaping future experiences. It's all interconnected.
And the goal, nirvana, isn't a place like heaven.
No, definitely not a place. It's the extinguishing of that cycle of suffering. It's liberation from clinging, from the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. Not something you get by striving in the usual sense, but something realized when the causes of suffering fall away.
Okay, so we've got this really potent blend now. Taoist flow and naturalness meet Buddhist insights on suffering, no self, liberation. This is where Zen, or Chan as it was called in China, starts to emerge.
Exactly. Chan is the Chinese word, which became Zen in Japan. It truly is a unique synthesis. That Taoist flavor, the directness, the spontaneity is unmistakable.
Bodhidharma is the figure always mentioned, bringing it to China. What was his main thing?
Bodhidharma, yeah, supposedly arrived around the 5th or 6th century, first patriarch of Zen in China. The historical details are, let's say, a bit legendary.
Okay.
But the spirit of his teaching, as it's remembered, was about a direct transmission of enlightenment, mind to mind. Less focus on scriptures, more on meditation, looking directly into one's own nature to realize Buddhahood.
So really doubling down on experience over theory.
Absolutely, which again fits so well with the Taoist leanings. And Zen began to really emphasize the possibility of immediate awakening satori, a sudden breakthrough, not just slow, gradual progress.
That suddenness feels very Taoist too, like that spontaneous action.
It does, doesn't it? And there's a famous story that really illustrates this shift involving Huineng, the 6th patriarch, the versus competition.
Oh yeah, the one about keeping the mind mirror clean.
That's the one. So the senior monk, Shen Su, writes this verse: "The body is the Bodhi tree. The mind is like a clear mirror standing. Take care to wipe it diligently, keep it free from dust." Makes sense, right? Practice, effort.
Yeah, sounds reasonable.
But then Huineng, who was just a layman working in the kitchen at the time, supposedly illiterate, has someone write his response. Bodhi originally has no tree. The clear mirror also has no stand. Fundamentally, not one thing exists. Where is there for dust to alight?
Wow. That's
Yeah.
radically different.
Totally. It points directly to sunyata, emptiness. The idea that things don't have inherent fixed existence. There's nothing to polish because there's no separate mirror self to begin with. That insight is what led to him being recognized as the 6th patriarch.
A powerful illustration of emptiness. And Zen developed some unique teaching methods from there, sometimes pretty unconventional ones.
Oh, definitely. Masters started using direct pointing, maybe a gesture, a shout, a seemingly random action to shock students out of their conceptual rut.
Like hitting them with a stick.
Well, yes, sometimes. Or using paradoxical questions, koans that defy logical answers, and just generally employing what Watts calls strange words and extraordinary behavior.
Why? Just to be weird.
Not just to be weird. The aim was to break down the students' habitual, rational thinking patterns, to bypass the intellect and trigger a direct, intuitive grasp of reality, like shaking someone awake.
Short-circuiting the logical mind, basically.
That's a good way to put it. And as Zen moved into Japan, it developed further, notably into the Soto and Rinzai schools.
Right. What's the main difference there?
Both aim for the same realization, but their emphasis differs. Soto tends to emphasize shikantaza, just sitting, zazen, as the primary practice. Enlightenment is found in the sitting itself, not as a goal to be reached later.
Okay.
Rinzai, while also doing zazen, places a strong emphasis on koan practice, actively grappling with those paradoxical riddles to catalyze breakthroughs, or kensho satori.
Got it. So we've traced the path. Let's pivot now to the core principles and practices themselves, like in part 2 of Watt's book. We keep coming back to emptiness, sunyata.
Yes, it's absolutely central, but it's so easy to misunderstand. It's not nihilism. It doesn't mean nothing exists or nothing matters.
So what does it mean?
It means things lack inherent, independent, fixed existence. Everything is relational, interdependent, constantly changing. Nothing exists purely on its own, separate from everything else. Recognizing this can be incredibly liberating. It frees you from grasping onto things as if they were permanent and solid.
So it's seeing the interconnectedness.
Exactly. And seeing the lack of a fixed self in the middle of it all, it leads to a sense of openness, potentiality.
Okay. And the main practice associated with Zen is often Zazen, sitting quietly, doing nothing. But it's obviously more than just sitting still.
Oh, much more. Zazen isn't about achieving some special state or even stopping thought completely, which is impossible anyway. It's more about cultivating non-judgmental awareness.
How so?
You sit, you pay attention maybe to the breath, maybe just open awareness, and you simply observe whatever arises in the mind. Thoughts, feelings, sensations. You notice them without getting carried away by them, without judging them as good or bad. You just let them come and go.
Easier said than done, I imagine.
Definitely. The mind wanders, gets bored, gets agitated. The practice is just to gently bring the attention back again and again without criticizing yourself. It's training in being present.
And then there's the Rinzai approach with Kores added to Zazen. How do those paradoxical riddles actually work in practice?
Well, a master gives a student a koan, like what was your original face before your parents were born? Or Chao Chu's famous mu in response to, does a dog have Buddha nature?
Mu, which just means no or nothingness, right?
Right. But it's not meant as a simple yes-no. The student is supposed to hold this koan constantly in their mind during zazen, during daily activities. They wrestle with it.
But you can't solve it logically.
That's the entire point. Logic fails. The rational mind hits a wall. By intensely focusing on this insoluble problem, the student exhausts their conceptual thinking.
And
then, hopefully, there's a breakthrough. A sudden shift in perspective, an intuitive insight satori that transcends the paradox. The koan acts like a wedge to crack open ordinary consciousness.
a kind of intense mental pressure.
You could say that. It forces the mind beyond its usual limits.
And this Zen sensibility, it doesn't just stay on the meditation cushion, does it? Watts talks about Zen in the arts.
Yes, absolutely. It permeates things like calligraphy, painting, poetry, martial arts, even tea ceremony. The emphasis is often on spontaneity, simplicity, directness.
How does that show up?
Think of Japanese ink wash painting, sumi-e. Often just a few bold strokes. The artist isn't trying to perfectly replicate reality in detail.
Right, it's more about capturing the essence.
Exactly. Capturing the spirit, the energy, the isness of the subject in that moment. It often comes from a place of no mind, acting intuitively without deliberate calculation or striving for effect. It reflects a mind that's present and uncluttered.
So the art becomes an expression of that Zen state of being.
Precisely. It's embodying the principles, being fully present in the action, letting go of ego and preconceived ideas.
Okay, this has been a really rich dive into the Way of Zen. We've seen that blend of Buddhism and Taoism, the focus on direct experience, sudden awakening, understanding emptiness, and how it applies in practice.
And the key thing, I think, is how Zen offers a way of knowing that feels different from just piling up information. You mentioned wanting knowledge without feeling overwhelmed. Yeah.
Zen suggests a path that's less about what you know and more about how you know. It's about those aha moments, shifting your whole frame of reference.
And for you, listening, even if you're not planning to become a Zen monk, these core ideas, like being present, like letting go of rigid thinking, appreciating simplicity, they seem really relevant for just dealing with modern life, don't they?
Absolutely. They offer practical ways to navigate complexity, regardless of your specific field or interests.
So maybe a final thought for you to chew on. Consider that Taoist idea of ru wei, doing by not doing. How might letting go of constant effort, of trying to force things in certain areas of your life, actually allow something more profound or effective to happen?
Or think about emptiness, Sunyata. How might embracing the idea that things aren't fixed, that maybe you aren't as fixed as you think, actually open up more space, more freedom, more potential in your experience?
Worth pondering. Thank you for bringing the Way of Zen to us and for joining this deep dive. Hopefully it sparks some fresh perspectives for you.